All right, this is Jack Yates, graduate student, Masters of Science in Marketing. First day here at South by Southwest, first time in South by Southwest. Third video. This one's kind of exciting because this is about Rivian, the electric car company, Rivian. And what's the interesting thing about this is that they are one of the main hosts, sponsors, I suppose, sponsors of South by Southwest this year. So it was really cool to kind of see their name plastered all over the event and then get to attend one of their own events. And the format and type for this event were both activation, what it was called, open to all badges. And what it was a display of their all new Rivian SUV, which I think they call the R1T, which I don't remember what that stands for. But it was also interesting because they had renewable electric charging ports for your devices, your phones, while you could sit there and chat about the car with a few of the, I guess you could say, event runners hanging out around it. I spoke to a guy named Drew who was very nice and knew a lot about the car. And I'm not interested in this event mostly because I'm a car person. This connects really to my startup interests, which is one of my 3 categories for this class, because Rivian is a really good example of a startup gone right. You know, they were founded, I think, around 20 years ago in Irvine, California, and I think they also have a few offices in Brooklyn, New York, I want to say. Again, this is prior knowledge, but I confirmed this with Drew. And they went public in 2020. And I think, in my mind, that's recent. That's pretty new for a company to go public, that's almost, their growth period was around, twice as long as they've been public. So from a startup perspective, they're a very new company, excuse me. And the car itself was very cool. It had 3 motors, 2 in the back, one powering each wheel, and then one in the front powering both the wheels in the front, which was something I had never heard of existed. It had a front and a back trunk. Again, something I'd never heard existed. Unlike Rivian's, some of Rivian's previous models, like their pickup truck, it didn't have the gear tunnel, which is, if you're familiar with the Rivian pickup truck, it's that kind of tube that opens out between the back seat and the truck bed. But you have all this extra trunk space, so that's interesting. And then, again, I'm looking at this from a startup, from an innovation perspective, not from like a nerd out car guy perspective. So, there was a lot of features of the car, I can't emphasize this enough, that I have never seen anywhere else. And I think that, along with sort of Rivian's idea of making a cool electric car, I mean, who makes an electric pickup that looks cool? They're like the only people that do that. Tesla certainly doesn't, but we'll get to that in a moment. Drew, the guy working the event again, was showing me around the car, pointing out features, and I ended up asking him, like, what about a spare tire? And he says, this car has a spare tire. It's inflatable, so it's like this tiny little thing packed away in the side, in the back trunk, because there's 2 trunks, the back trunk of this car, and there's a built-in air compressor in the car. Which even, from viewing this from someone who lives in Colorado, from like an outdoor off-roading trail perspective, having an air compressor in the car is incredible. And he even showed me that the front monitor had ways to automatically check the PSI of each wheel, which I thought was really cool. The car also had auto leveling device, so that, let's say my hand is the car, if you parked on an uneven surface, you could push a button and the car would use its shock system to level out, so it was perfectly flat. So if any of those people out there are going to do, car camping or something like that, it's perfect for that. Again, like, I want to talk about Tesla in a second, but I look at this from an innovation point. These are all, from what I know about cars, which granted isn't in depth. I don't read car magazines or anything, but these are things that no other car company is doing. And this is something that Rivian's always been doing, even when it was in startup phase, is just pushing innovation. And me and Drew talked about that a lot, how like with every model, They're trying to do something that no one else is doing, which is the very ethos of their founding for making electric cars in the first place. I mean, they were doing this back in the 2000s. You know, that's when no one was talking about electric cars, you know, except for maybe Tesla. No one was talking about Tesla then. And I couldn't help myself. Near the end of our maybe 30, 45-minute conversation about Rivian, I asked Drew I just sort of offhandedly was like, so what's your thoughts on Tesla? Kind of thinking about the political climate and all the bad things Elon Musk is doing. And, you know, sorry if you're a person out there that owns Tesla stock right now, but even that's not doing so great. But that's beside the point. And Drew had this really great political response where he just goes like, oh, we don't really discuss our competition. But we like Tesla for their charging port network, which I thought was really funny. So, like, he was not going to sit there and say, yeah, Elon Musk is a fascist, screw him. He was just sort of like, yeah, the fact that Tesla has a more, let's just say, whatever the fancy word is, they have a larger charging port network across the United States that Rivian users can access no problem, is great. And then I started asking about, and this just proves again how cool and innovative Rivian is. And I'm, you know, if it has sustainability, specifically environmental sustainability in it, I'm like all in if it's a startup. And of course, this isn't a startup, but he was talking about how Rivian's charging ports are made out of old buildings. So they'll take old rundown buildings that are wired for electricity and repurpose them into charging centers for their car. So they're not building anything new. They're taking something old and decaying and repurposing it in a modern, sustainable way. And I just like love that. So it was a really, really interesting case study in a startup success story that has never lost its innovation and never lost its sustainability initiative. And, you know, I want to buy one now. That's kind of like what I left with. Like I was sold if I wasn't sold before. But again, one of my main three focuses of this entire weekend is startups. And so to see a successful, sustainable startup, which is like the exact niche that I focus on in my work, in my life, to be frank, was really great to see, especially one that's keeping its innovation alive. I mean, you know, the Tesla Cybertruck is kind of embarrassing compared to the Rivian truck. It just gets a lot more PR because their CEO is, well, he's who he is, and I'll just leave it at that. But it was a really cool event, really appreciated it, and, you know, I think they're here tomorrow, and I might even go check it out again.